Welcome, welcome, welcome to developing an author's mindset in the classroom. As a former ELA teacher and a former librarian, I am so excited about this topic. So, developing an author's mindset in the classroom. Well, hey, y'all, I'm Dr. Desiree Alexander. I am coming to you from Louisiana, and these are all of the different ways that you can contact me. Honestly, if you can just get to my website, you can get to me. That's educatoralexander.com. I will say that if you are watching us on the recording and on the YouTube channel, no, you do not get a certificate of attendance, but you do get the knowledge. And definitely click in the description right underneath the video and get the link for resources for today. So what do we have coming up next? Black Culture Game Night, sponsored by ISTE. So if you are a Black educator anywhere in the world, you can join the Black Culture Game Night, Thursday, February 27th. Then you have Grow with Google, digital skills for everyday tasks. This is open to everyone. It's sponsored by Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, Omicron Gamma Zeta chapter. But everyone is welcome. You can see what we're talking about, some different things in sheets and docs. So register and come with us. Digital signage that matters. That will be March 1st, which surprisingly is next weekend this year. All right. It's going by so quickly. All right. So March 1st, digital signage that matters. Come and check that out. And then we have Enhanced Picture Book Interactive Read Alouds with primary sources on March 29th. And then Beyond the Basics, Practical AI for Everyday Teaching on April 12th. And we have some presenters who are, already part of the families is coming on back to teach multiple sessions, which we always love. I will be at ISTE this summer, and these are the sessions currently that I will be a part of or presenting. This does change throughout the month, so it should get a little bit more hectic, but for now, this is what it is. We always have a self-paced online courses that you can always go to for any kind of test prep for like Google Level 1, Level 2, or for the SLLA Educational Leadership Certification Test. So help yourself. Or if you want some support time and talk to me about whatever, you have that as well. All right. If you want to learn something or if you want to teach something, fill out the form at edalex.net/events. All of these webinars, all of these events you can sign up for at edalex.net/events. You can tell me what you want to see in the webinar series, or do you want to present? We take very first-time presenters and we take international presenters who've been doing this for years. So please let us know what you want to present or what you want to learn. Okay, we know what this slide means. This means we are about to get to what we came here for, understanding how to develop an author's mindset in the classroom.
Well, thank you everyone for being here today. And what Dr. Alexander said about first-time presenters, I was a pretty new presenter the first time I presented with her. I had only done it once or twice. And so I definitely encourage other people to do this. And this is now my third time. So this is developing an author's mindset in the classroom. And it's basically, I'm telling my story over the past 2 years of some things that I learned to help me do that. A little bit about me. I still consider myself a newlywed. This is my wife, Michelle, and we've been married almost 4 years now. We are involved in the youth department at Second St. John Missionary Baptist Church, where I also serve as a deacon. I teach in West Memphis, Arkansas, which is right over the bridge from Memphis, Tennessee, at Wonder Junior High. And I also have the privilege of serving as one of their two athletic PA announcers. I have a lot of fun doing that. Outside of school, I enjoy hiking. Michelle and I watch a lot of movies. I enjoy reading books when I have time. So that's me. And I always have to brag on our new school. This is Wonder Junior High, and this is only our second year to be open. And we are very proud of our new building. We are a merger of two smaller schools in West Memphis, East Junior High and the former Wonder Junior High. When we combine two schools, each of about 300 students, and they kept the name Wonder Junior High because it had some historical significance as the black high school at one time before integration. So this is our new school, though, and we're very proud of it. As I said, in our second year. So let's get into the topic, developing an author's mindset. The bad news, sorry, the Zoom was blocking me. Now I've got it. Let me make one more adjustment. Okay, now I'm set. This is according to an article in the New York Times by Dana Goldstein in 2017. Three-quarters of both 12th and 8th graders lack proficiency in writing, according to the most national assessment of educational progress. And 40% of those who took the ACT writing exam in the high school class of 2016, now that's pre-COVID, lacked the reading and writing skills necessary to complete successfully a college-level English composition class. So we're talking pre-COVID on some of that. And there was already bad news about the writing skills of our young population. This is from an article in 2017, also pre-COVID, in the LA Times. Every time I assign a major piece of writing, one that is multiple pages in length, I brace myself for the avalanche of papers about to be turned in, the sheer volume of 100 plus essays submitted in one day that throws me back. It's the poor quality that is troubling. It can be quite disheartening to read writing from advanced students and realize that these young people, the best in their class, struggle to organize their thoughts, unable to form a clear argument. Now, he's discussing honor students. Most of our students are not honor students. This is from an article in an education journal from Texas. Socialization is not the only classroom challenge that has resulted from the isolation of students during the pandemic. So now we're post-pandemic in this article. While students struggle to communicate verbally, so too do they struggle to effectively express themselves in writing, from emails to formal compositions. And those of you who are, especially who are English teachers, I'm sure you have encountered this in your classroom. And we'll get into that. They write like they talk. What we do know is that success data of students who complete college composition within 1 year of college enrollment have declined since the pandemic. Therefore, we must focus our attention on addressing this issue with our post-pandemic students. So as we're seeing, the problem was already there pre-pandemic, and the pandemic just made it worse. Now let's quote me. And I'm sure you, as educators, have said these very same things. They don't capitalize their sentences. I'm speaking of 7th and 8th graders. They don't put periods at the end of their sentences. They don't include punctuation within their sentences. They can't write a complete sentence. They can't make connections in their writing or thinking. I'm sure you encounter that as well. But there is good news. This is from an article in Forbes magazine in 2024, post-pandemic. The 2024 Education Recovery Scoreboard, a collaboration between Harvard and Stanford, reports students in 30 states have recouped approximately 1/3 of the 3-year pandemic math loss and 1/4 of the reading loss. So we're nowhere close to where we need to be, but there is progress being made, according to Forbes. To finish out the introduction, I'll quote myself again. Over the past 2 years, I've taken several unconventional steps which have provided my students with far greater exposure to the writing process. I believe that these actions have inspired them to become more effective writers and make a stronger pursuit toward overall success in life. So I'm going to tell my story today, basically, over the past 2 years. And unfortunately, it involves educators who didn't always act as educators should, and decisions that were made that I wish had not been made. But as you often hear in church, and as you hear in support groups, as people tell their stories, you're thankful for the bumps in the road and for the hard times because they got you where you are. And without some of these bad experiences, I would not have made these discoveries. So I'm thankful that these experiences took place. The plan is I'm going to share a number of techniques. Some were aimed at correct writing, creative style, and proper techniques, but I'm more on the macro level here. I'm not going to get a lot into how to teach sentence structure. This is more about exposure and inspiration. 7 things we're going to talk about. taking your students to see other authors for exposure, bringing authors into your classroom and school for exposure, creating easier access to books, creating a culture within your school that encourages reading, requiring proper writing, publishing your own book as a class, and finally, seeking out essay and poetry contests. So, as I said, I'm not really getting into the mechanics of how to teach writing. These are more inspirational type procedures. So, number one is take your students to other authors for exposure. I love the movie Dangerous Minds, and it stars Michelle Pfeiffer as a new teacher by the name of Lou Ann Johnson. And there's a scene here that describes situations that I've been in over the years and that probably some of you have as well. She is not getting a lot of support for administration in her efforts. And it just so happens she and her students conveniently all end up at the amusement park. Surely there was no pre-planning involved. And she gets called into the principal's office, and Principal Gandy says, "Miss Johnson, the school board would have every right to insist on your dismissal. You informed no one. You got no permission slips." She says, "But there was no one to inform. All of the kids just decided to go, and they took me along." And he says, "Did they pay for you?" And she says, "No, I paid for them. I was just so moved by their invitation." He says, "This wasn't by any chance their reward for reading poetry, was it? And you'll love the ending. In my class, Mr. Gandy, poetry is its own reward." The point of that is if you have open-minded administration that supports outside opportunities, that's great. But not every teacher can boast of that. And I have been in schools, and I'm sure that you have been in schools, where there is very little support and encouragement for outside resources. And so you have to figure out creative ways, like she did in the movie, to take matters into your own hands. So remember, just like Michelle Pfeiffer in the movie, administration does not dictate random coincidence. There are many ways to get around that without violating any policy whatsoever. So it all started with a Facebook post. And as I go through the story, you'll see a lot involving Facebook. And so I want to encourage you to follow as many education sites and educators and authors as you can on Facebook. Many of my ideas came from following the right people on Facebook. But I saw that a local school had, excuse me, that's the next one. I saw that an author would be at the West Memphis Library coming up. And so I thought, well, that's a good opportunity for my students. She's from our town. She matches the demographics of the majority of my students. So I felt obliged to announce it in class and then print it out and then hand it out to about 300 students around the building and offer extra credit for attendance. And they came. So here we are at the West Memphis Library. Several of my students, the school librarian came as well. And this is us posing with the author's not in this picture. She comes a little bit later, though. So they actually responded, many of the students. And they brought young siblings as well. Here's one of my students and two of her siblings and cousins who came. That's the author, Renetta Daniels, posing with her. And their teacher. I came and spent the afternoon there as well to encourage my students. And so the point of that is my students were able to meet and be encouraged by a published author. You don't often get that opportunity. And so when it comes along, it's great to seize upon it. I'm going to leave this slide up for about 10 seconds if you would like to take a screenshot of it. This is Renetta Daniel. She is that author. She lives in the Nashville, Tennessee area, but she's from West Memphis, Arkansas originally. So if you want to pull your phone out, take a shot of that. I highly recommend her. And she loves to get out and promote what she's doing. Okay, going to move on at this point. Then came another Facebook post. And I saw that TEDx, the TED Talks, would be coming to Memphis. And we are located just over the bridge, the Mississippi River Bridge from Memphis, about 15 minutes away. And so that also provides me with a lot of opportunities. So when I saw this, I felt obliged to investigate. So I sent a message and asked, it never hurts to ask, could you give my students free tickets or discounted tickets? Is there anything you could do? And they replied, unfortunately, they can come for free. Not unfortunate at all. Excuse me. And so we did. Here we are. There's myself, my wife, who is, I couldn't do this without her, and four of our English students. And we are at TED Talks in Memphis seeing authors of speeches. So there are many types of authors. The first was an author of books. These are authors of speeches. And we bonded in the process. Here we are posing outside the TED Talks. And then came another post on Facebook. And I saw that there would be an event in Memphis called a Celebration of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And it just so happens our eighth graders were reading the Diary of Anne Frank. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, if you don't know, was a minister in Germany during the Holocaust who felt that God had called him to lead an assassination effort on Adolf Hitler and was part of the movement to do that. And they recently made a movie about him, and the man who made the movie was speaking in Memphis. He's also the same person who produced Elf. And so since it was free, we went there too. So here are some of my students again. These are actually my last year students, but this was this school year. And I knew that they were now reading about Anne Frank in their eighth grade class, and I teach seventh grade. And so I pulled them in again. So we went there too. And this time they got to learn from authors in the film genre. So now we've seen authors in the book genre, in the speech genre, and now the film genre. And we participated in the discussion. This was so cool. This is Sky, one of my students, and she is much braver than myself. So she got up and asked a question at the end, and here is Sky speaking.
Hi, my name is Sky. My question for you is, what motivated you to go into film, and why did you do this story specifically?
Okay, well,
so proud of Sky. And so that's an opportunity that we would have not have gotten otherwise if I had not kind of taken the Michelle Pfeiffer approach and thought outside the box. So none of these were school functions. I worked, independently, going directly to their parents, and we just sort of, with the permission of their parents, with written permission forms, sort of conveniently ended up in the same place. Number two is bring the authors to your students for exposure. There was another Facebook post, and I saw that another local author, local to West Memphis, by the name of Crystal Booth, had been signing books at one of our local elementary schools. And I reached out to her on Facebook and introduced myself, and we became good friends over time. And she offered to come speak to my students. So I brought her into my classroom, and she was so gracious as to give up an entire day to speak to my students last year. Here she is with some of our students, and here she is with a lot of our students. She literally started with first period, and she spoke to every single class period. And there were a couple of class periods where we brought in other classes as well, and it was just an amazing experience. By the end of the day, she probably reached 150 students. She gave away some copies of her book. I purchased a few more copies and gave them away. So it was just an amazing experience for them to meet a local author who had gone to their school, been a teenage mom at one point, and is now just flourishing and prospering as a person. For future reference, this is Crystal Booth. I'm going to leave this up for about 10 seconds if you'd like to take a picture. She is now the author of two books. Breathing Underwater is her autobiography, mainly of her younger life as a teenage mom and a young adult. And then this past summer, she published The Weight of Your I Do, and that's a marriage book, mainly aimed at women, but I'm sure there's plenty of wisdom for the men too. I've got the book, and I'm planning to read it. So this is Crystal Booth. She was so kind. 2 weeks ago, she came back to our school and spoke at our evening literacy night by the ELA department. So an amazing opportunity. So point two, bring the authors to your students for exposure. Number three is make access to books as easy as possible. And it sounds like a no-brainer, but it's not always. This is one of those stories that I wish had not happened, but at the same time, I'm glad it did because I wouldn't have gotten where I am without it. It all started at a book fair at a school where I once taught, and I was so excited. Book fairs are just awesome. I remember them as a student. I've been to them as a teacher, and there's nothing that gets me more excited as an English teacher than a book fair. But as I was at the book fair, I got my students pumped up. We were in the classroom. We were getting ready to walk down to it. I told them stories like, hey, I went back in time last night and I met people who are dead now. And no, it wasn't a seance. I went there in a book, and you can go anywhere in the world in a book. And I had them so pumped up, and we got to the library, and the person in charge of the book fair only wanted to talk about one thing, and that was if you don't want a book, if you don't want to use your $10 credit that the school is giving you, go stand over there. That was her entire emphasis, and it was more like she was encouraging the students not to use their $10 credit and get a book. And it was like we were working against literacy. And the more I tried to talk up using your credit, the more I got shut down. And so I saw that sometimes your school library is not a place where students or teachers, for that matter, feel very welcome. And I put the little graphic up here, abandon all hope, all ye who enter here. You've probably worked in places where that's the library, unfortunately. And so when we're in an environment like that, it creates an atmosphere where students don't really want to read. And so in many cases, we're up against a culture which is working against instead of for literacy, and the very people who should be supporting literacy are working against it. So when you encounter that, create alternatives. As I said, I would not have gone to the next step that I'm about to show you if this bad experience had not occurred. In response to the climate against reading, I created scholar pages. And over Christmas break that year, I pulled in books and I created my banners and my signage. And when we got back after Christmas break, I put this table out in the hallway from my classroom, and I'm going to blow up the signs for you. This sign on the left says, if you see a book that interests you, take it with you. The sign on the right says, when you finish reading it, return it to the table. The sign in the middle says, it's that simple. There's no sign out process. There's intentionally no accountability. If the books don't come back, that is just fine. Because my amazing wife and I continue to this day, over a year later, to stock it from thrift stores, library book sales, and donations. Eventually, it tripled in size. I had to get 2 more tables and had about 60 books sitting out and more underneath it. And we constantly stocked it from book sales. We love, my wife and I love to go to the Goodwill bins. We go in Memphis, but we love to go to the one in Nashville where they sell books by the pound. And about once a year, we will make the trip to Nashville on a vacation. And we don't leave Nashville without going to the Goodwill bins and stocking up on kids' books for it. We have friends around town that will donate. My dad goes to his local library once a month at their book sale and stocks us up. We don't spend all that much money on this, but we're constantly stocking it up with books. And then at the end of the year, I gave them all away. So I said, books in a box collecting dust are worthless. Books in the hands of students can change the world. And so here's one sign I had out. I gave away every single book that we had acquired, and we restocked over the summer. So we're constantly trying to create a new culture of reading. Well, I began to see that we were dealing with a youth culture. It wasn't just adults that weren't putting the proper emphasis on reading and literacy. There was a youth culture. So this is a stock photo here, but I see this every day in my classroom. Here's the young lady wearing earbuds, and in class, you're constantly having to tell them to remove the earbuds. She's staring at her cell phone. We do it as adults too. But that's where the youth culture has gone. And so that's what we're up against. Worse still, we're dealing with adults many times who are promoting a culture of apathy. And we see in many of our schools, I'm sure you've seen it in yours, that many of the, quote, professionals who are supposed to be combating the apathy toward reading are actually making it worse. That's why I love going to conferences and coming into webinars like this one, because I get to work with like-minded people who think like I do. So totally a side note, go to as many outside conferences as you can so you can get pumped up and be with like-minded professionals who are forward-thinking like you are. But we're up against youth who have a culture that doesn't really appreciate literacy like ours did in our generation. We're up against many professionals who are supposed to be combating the apathy and are not. So again, I took matters into my own hands and I created hashtag strips. Well, all of our youth know what a hashtag is, reading for pleasure. And I created little small posters that said, "What book are you currently reading?" And I plastered them all over the school and didn't ask permission, but it was fine. And in the hallway, I created some exposure and some incentives for students to finish a book and loosely verify it. I got some advice from my librarian friend in the Marion School District who had worked with me before in West Memphis. And she said, don't push them heavily. Don't give them a test on the book. Just give them some loose questions that you'll ask to verify it and give some incentives like candy. And so that's exactly what I did. And if you could, on here, write the name of the book, the author, and a little bit about it, I would ask you just 2 or 3 brief questions about it. And yes, there are many students who slip through the cracks and pulled the wool over my eyes, but not everyone. And so many students read a book that otherwise would not have done so. And so here it is in the hallway, drawing attention from so many students, and we've got students starting to read, and we're creating a culture. Then World Book Day came along, and I think Facebook is where I found out about that. And so I put this in the hall. I created this challenge: read one book of at least 100 pages in 1 week. And on this one, I did make them fill out a book report form because we gave away gift cards on this one. And I had a principal who was very supportive of this, and he went out and got gift cards for us to give out. And there they are. There are my students who read their 100 pages in 1 week, and we were so proud of them. This is Mr. Arthur Quarles, the most amazing principal I've ever worked for in the middle. And this is Miss V, who was our school secretary at the time. And I couldn't have done it without these 2 individuals as well. But I was so proud of these students. The student to the right of Mr. Quarles is a SPED student who just got so excited about this. And she still comes up to me about once a week and wants to know when we're going to do it again. And so I tell her to keep reminding me. I hadn't forgot, but to not let me forget. So I was just so proud of these students for responding. But it took being forward thinking and looking around me and seeing that, obviously none of the other teachers are going to do this. I'm just going to have to take matters into my own hands. And sometimes you have to do that. Also, on the matter of culture, I started an after-school book club. Also discovered this one on Facebook. There was a book called The Miscalculations of Lightning Girl. And I thought, what a good book for a book club. In fact, the post where I saw it was recommending that you use it for a book club. And so I did. And the students began to come. Now, the secret, I hate that it's this way, but it is cookies. Cookies and juice boxes is what got them in. But once they were there, they were hooked. And I created a relaxing vibe. Here's my classroom. There's pillows. There's a rug in the middle. And so after school, we would sit around there. In small classes, I still sometimes let them do it in class, but in a big class, I tried it, and you've got to have the structure unless it's honor students. But after school, this relaxing setting was perfect. And so we would sit around, read the book, and discuss it, eat cookies, and have Kool-Aid jammers. And it was a great experience. So here's some of my students. They responded to that as well. Over the summer, I thought I need to continue this somehow. And so I reached out via a YouTube video and posted it on some of our local Facebook pages. I'm going to play about 30 seconds of it to show you the word that I tried to get out over the summer. I called it the Summer of Reading, and here's a check-in that I did. I'll pause it there for the sake of time, but I go on to show them what I am reading. And it was something that would match hopefully their interests. I also promoted it with Facebook posts. This is me posting about the summer of reading that I declared. And so here's where I felt like I needed to match their demographics. I teach in a school that's about 97% African American. I had gone to a civil rights workshop in Georgia, in Atlanta, over the summer, and met this gentleman and read his autobiography. And so I wanted to point out to him, hey, here's what I'm reading, to show them that, hey, we're on the same page. I'm reading things that would interest you as well. Number 5 is require proper writing and ask other teachers to require proper writing. Sadly, I'm seeing that many of the elementary school teachers that have sent them to me may not be, and I'm not in those classrooms. And if there's any elementary teachers here, I'm sure you are, but I'm having a lot of students come to me that don't seem to have the basic writing skills they should have. So I noticed how our students talked. I noticed how they texted. I noticed how their parents post on Facebook, because many of them are my friends now. And all that was fine. But the sad part is that is how they write. Our students write just like they talk, and just like they text, and just like they post. And so I learned a lesson. If you really want to alienate those students and create a situation where they're not going to hear a word you say for the rest of the year, start correcting their grammar during conversations. I'm here to tell you there's a better way to address it and a more effective way to address it. This is how I address it. I say to my students, when I'm at home with my wife or when I'm hanging out with my friends, I talk just like you do. It's called informal language. But when I'm at school or speaking to a group or writing, I have to use proper English in those situations. That's called formal language. And so the walls are removed when you approach it that way, and suddenly they're willing to be taught. I remember my own sons when they were in middle school talking about asking the teacher, can I go to the restroom? And the teacher's like, I don't know, can you? Because the proper wording is, may I go? And I remembered that my children were totally turned off by that. And so I realized that's not how you win them over. You win them over by putting yourself in their position and saying, hey, I'm just like you. I talk just like you. But there's a time when you have to change that. And so that's what I'm going to teach you, students. Many of our students have gotten to us without this basic knowledge. The dog walked to town. That's a pretty basic sentence. And we know that the dog is the complete subject. Walked to town is the complete predicate. The subject contains a noun, which is dog in this case. The predicate contains a verb, which is walked in this case. But I'm learning many of my students are coming to me somehow without that basic knowledge, and I've got to meet them where they are. If I make fun of them for not having that basic knowledge, I've totally lost them. They're not going to hear a word I say all year. I've got to back up and fill in the gaps. It's unfortunate that we have to do that, but it's the world that many of us are living in, and we've just got to accept it and work accordingly. They don't capitalize their sentences in many cases, in most cases with my students. It's a little t, the dog. They don't put in punctuation in most cases. Y'all, they write just like they text. And I hit on that too in the classroom. I say, guys, when I text my friends and my wife, I do it just like you do. I don't capitalize. I don't put periods. I actually do. My wife makes fun of me for dictating periods. But I tell them I don't do that either, but it's different in school. And the sad thing is the expensive curriculum that you're using most likely ignores those facts too, because I don't know why, but they've taken most of the grammar out of our curriculum. And your district is beating you over the head every day saying, teach it with fidelity. I may have coworkers or supervisors on here, and they already know I hate that word fidelity. So here's the bottom line. Whatever you have to do to get it done, whether it's in your curriculum or not, whether it takes bell work, homework, if you just got to shut the door, sneak it in when the administration's not looking, Teach proper sentence structure, whatever you got to do it. Create assignments in which the answers have to be given in proper and complete sentences. I've built my teaching style on that. This is English class. Everything you write has to be in a proper and complete sentence with a capital letter in the beginning, a complete thought, and a period or proper end punctuation at the end. Many of my students freak out because they've never been required to do that before, and this is 7th grade. Grade them closely and deduct points accordingly. It's minus 2 or 3 points in my class every time you don't capitalize a sentence, every time you don't put a period in the end. If the answer is not in a complete sentence, you get 0 credit for that answer. However, I allow them to be corrected for a regrade upon return. Every paper that I hand back that's graded, I make this speech. Any mistakes that you made on that, correct them, turn them back in, and I will regrade it, no strings attached, and put the new grade in. And ask teachers of other subject areas to do the same. Be careful how you come across, but I have emailed science and history teachers and said to them, I'm not your supervisor, but it would sure be cool if you would do this too, and it sure would help me a lot. And some have picked up on it and done it. Here's what you're going to get from the students. You do too much. We hear it all day, every day. You'll hear it constantly. Consider it a badge of honor, guys. Sadly, it may be the first time in quite a while that these students have been required to write properly. And you may be the only teacher on their entire schedule who's doing it. So consider that a badge of honor and stick with it and don't give in on it. Number 6 is publish your own book as a class. This was one of the coolest things that we did 3 school years ago. There's a company called Student Treasures, and this is their website, studenttreasures.com, only 1 T in the middle. And they will send you a free book publishing kit. You write and illustrate the book yourself as a class. You literally lay out every page on paper, print it out, paste it on there, make it just right. And then you mail it back to the company. And you will receive 1 free book at no charge. Now, the way they make their money is they sell additional copies of it, and they're a little pricey. I think they were $19.95. And so their goal is to get parents to purchase it. But even if you never buy a single copy of it, you've got 1 class copy for free, and there's no obligation to buy anything. And I went in and I had some extra money to spend and bought a copy for every one of my students that year. But it gives you the opportunity to say, hey, we're published writers. And my students just loved it that year that we did it. There's our book. We wrote a poetry book. This is a poetic anthology, The Last Year of the Glorious Red Imps. It was our last year to be East Junior High. We were being merged with Wonder Junior High the next year. And so we wrote our own poetry book. This was my honor students and a few more students that they recruited in. That summer, we set up a red carpet party. There's our red carpet. And of course, pizza. You can't have a party without pizza. So here we are having our book signing and celebrating that we published our own book. The final one is to seek out essay and poetry contests for your students. And again, usually these don't come through your curriculum. You may be in an environment where the school is not promoting it. You've often got to just go out and seek these things out on your own. So there are a lot of contests at the local, state, national levels. February is Black History Month. March is Women's History Month. Look for essay contests right now on those topics. So it creates opportunities beyond the walls of your school for your students. And it may also create some good exposure for your school. I just entered 2 of my former 7th graders, they're now 8th graders, but you never stop being my student, into the National Council of Teachers of English essay contest. And we just submitted in last week and hoping for the best. And what I did with them, I said, you may not win. It's a national level contest, so we're going to make it worth your while. And my wife and I are going to give each of them a prize just for entering, because I know you couldn't enter this contest without putting several hours into it, and I didn't want that to go unrewarded somehow. So they're going to get an incentive for doing it. These are 3, and if you want to take a picture of these, feel free while I talk about them. the narrative high school writing contest, the deadline just ended for that, and it's for 9th through 12th graders. The National Council of Teachers of English Promising Young Writers contest, that's the one I just entered two of my last year 7th graders in who are now 8th graders. This Korean cultural writing contest, the deadline has not passed. And so that's an opportunity you have right in front of you. I'm going to leave that up for about 5 to 10 seconds before I move on. Okay, let's move on. So in conclusion, students respond to our example and our encouragement. If we create a culture where reading and writing are not encouraged and appreciated, if we sit back and allow apathy to take over, if we allow coworkers to create a place of apathy, then we get what we get. It's going to be a culture of apathy. We've got to step forward and create that culture if it doesn't exist. If we never challenge them to reach beyond the norm, then they're not going to strive to get there. Very few will. And in many cases, we can't afford to sit back and wait on leadership to catch a vision because it's just not there and it's just not going to be there. I applaud the schools that have it. I've worked in some great schools that had it. I've worked in some schools that unfortunately didn't have it. And so if you're in that school that has no vision from leadership, you've got to do what you can to create it. Create, promote, lead through opportunities. And your classroom will become a catalyst for amazing writing. So that concludes the presentation. This is me. And I'm, again, a 7th grade English teacher at Wonder Junior High. This is my cell number, which I freely give out. And this is my email address, which I freely give out. You can follow me on Facebook. I have a website called bizofteaching.weebly.com. I have a few things on Teachers Pay Teachers. And I haven't put it on here, but I'm actually on Twitter as well, although I don't do a whole lot with the Twitter. But Dr. Alexander insisted that I get on it. And I'm going to go to the slide for questions and turn it back over to Dr. Alexander.
Thank you so much. Yeah, you have to be on some kind of social media just so people can reach out to you. It doesn't have to be Twitter anymore for sure, but but some kind of social media. So that's good. I didn't know you had a Twitter or X or whatever. I would have put it everywhere. So but do we have any questions before we wrap on up? You can hop on the mic or you can put it in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and start wrapping up, but I'm going to look. If I see anybody unmute, I'll be quiet. Or if I see some hop in the chat, I'll read it out loud. But thank you so much. I feel like so many of the things you said were so practical. And I also feel like you could have done it as a librarian and as a classroom teacher. So like a lot of the stuff you said, it's like, oh, I did some of that, or I did like a variation of that when I was in the library. So really, really good. I hope we have some librarians that'll come and watch the YouTube video if we don't have any in here. Because I think it's good for both groups. So thank you so much. It's very, very practical stuff that everybody can do, especially I love the inspirational quotes at the end because it's the truth. If you kind of be that thing you want to see, right? So if you're like, oh, I don't see it, oh, this sucks, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, then do something about it. So I absolutely love that. Thank you so much for not only giving us the practical steps, but also giving us the inspiration to do it.
Thank you. It was a true pleasure.